The year is 1718. A British naval officer steps aboard a captured pirate vessel somewhere in the Caribbean. His sword is drawn. His men are right behind him. He has been told this ship belongs to one of the most feared crews sailing the Atlantic. Hardened killers, every one of them. What he finds instead will stay with him for the rest of his life. The deck is a graveyard of unconscious men. Rum barrels cracked open and draining into the wood. Bodies slumped over cannons, tangled in rigging, snoring beside loaded pistols. The most feared pirate ship in the Caribbean had not been taken in a blaze of cannon fire or a desperate sword fight at sea. It had been taken because the entire crew had drunk themselves into oblivion. Not a single shot fired. But here is what the history books skip over. Here is the part that genuinely stops you cold when you find it. Their captain was still standing. After consuming a volume of rum that would have killed most men twice over, the most eccentric, most reckless, most statistically improbable pirate in the entire golden age of piracy was still on his feet, still smiling, still completely and utterly ungovernable. His name was not Jack Sparrow, but it absolutely should have been. Welcome to the show. Today, we are peeling back one of cinema's most beloved characters and looking for the real human beings hiding underneath the eyeliner, the beads, and the rum. Because the truth, as it so often is stranger, darker, and considerably more entertaining than anything a Hollywood screenwriter ever put on paper. Jack Sparrow did not spring from imagination. He was built from history, piece by piece, from real men who actually existed, who actually sailed, who actually did things so outrageous that filmmakers had to tone them down to make them believable. Two men in particular. One gave Sparrow his personality, his drinking, his survival instinct, his genius for operating in the spaces between empires where no law could reach him. The other gave Sparrow his wardrobe, his theatrical brilliance, his code, his extraordinary professional record. Neither one of them was what you would expect. Let us start at the beginning. Jhon Ward was born around 1553 in Faversham, a small fishing town on the coast of Kent in southeastern England. He was, by every available account, nobody of importance. A poor fisherman in a country that had very little use for poor fishermen. England in the mid-16th century was in the early stages of becoming an empire, and men like Ward were precisely the ones who got left behind by that transformation. No inheritance, no connections, no path upward through the established order. He joined the Royal Navy not out of patriotism or duty, but out of the only alternative available: slow starvation on shore. For years he served under the English flag. He was good at it, good enough that contemporary accounts describe him as deeply knowledgeable about ships, navigation, and tactics at a level that far exceeded men who outranked him. He watched officers half his age command vessels they did not fully understand, and his resentment accumulated like sediment at the bottom of a harbor. Then, in 1603, something cracked. The exact circumstances are debated by historians, but the result is clear. Ward stole a small boat in the night, recruited a handful of equally desperate men, and sailed away from everything he had ever known. He was 50 years old. That detail matters. Most pirate careers began in a man's 20s, when the risk seemed acceptable and the body could absorb the punishment. Ward made his break at an age when most men in his era were already considered old, when the rational calculation was to endure whatever remained of a grinding existence and accept your lot. He did not accept his lot. Within 5 years of deserting the Royal Navy, Jhon Ward had become the most feared pirate operating in the Mediterranean. He built a fleet from captured vessels. He established a base of operations in Tunis, on the North African coast, a location that was not chosen randomly. And then he did something that sent shockwaves through the entire Christian world. He converted to Islam. Jhon Ward became Yusuf Rees. For Elizabethan England, this was not merely defection, it was apostasy. He had abandoned his country, his faith, his name, and his identity, and had placed himself beyond the reach of English justice in a way that a mere change of address never could have achieved. Under the protection of the Ottoman Empire, Ward was legally untouchable in the Mediterranean. He had outmaneuvered every government that wanted him dead. And this is where the historical record becomes genuinely remarkable. Contemporary accounts, and there are several, from merchants who survived encounters with him, from diplomats, from government correspondents, describe Ward as operating in a state of near constant intoxication. Not stumbling drunk, functioning drunk, the kind of drunk where an ordinary man would be unconscious, and Ward was making tactical naval decisions. A Venetian ambassador wrote about him in a letter dated 1608. He described Ward as a short, stocky man with a loud voice, perpetually holding a drink, wearing mismatched, expensive clothing that appeared to have been stolen from a dozen different captains at different points in time. The ambassador noted, and this phrase, once you read it, never quite leaves you, that Ward seemed to be performing the role of a pirate rather than actually being one, and yet was somehow the most dangerous man in the Mediterranean. That sentence, written in 1608, the screenwriters of Pirates of the Caribbean have never directly confirmed their source material, but every historian who studies the Golden Age of piracy points to Ward as one of the primary inspirations for Sparrow. There is also the name itself. The name Jack chose, or was given as his identifier to the world, Sparrow, a small, common bird that survives not by size or strength, but by wit and adaptability, exactly the qualities that define Jhon Ward's entire career. Ward negotiated a permanent safe harbor deal with the Bay of Tunis on one occasion while reportedly so drunk that his translator had to physically hold him upright. That negotiation kept Ward alive for decades. The most consequential meeting of his life, conducted barely vertical. He died in his bed in his palace in Tunis in 1622 at approximately 70 years of age, having spent 2 full decades in the most lethal profession available in the early modern world. The average active pirate career ended in death or capture within 3 years. Ward's lasted 20. If Jhon Ward gave Jack Sparrow his personality, then Bartholomew Roberts gave him his wardrobe, and his competence, and his coat. Roberts was born in Wales in 1682, nearly a full century after Ward, and he became something Ward never quite was, the most statistically successful pirate who ever lived. In 3 years of act piracy, Roberts captured over 400 vessels, more than Blackbeard, more than Calico Jack, more than any pirate before him or since. He did it wearing a crimson damask coat, a hat adorned with a red feather, diamonds on his fingers, and a gold cross around his neck that he had stolen from the King of Portugal. He was, by every account, a man who understood that appearance was a form of power, that theater and reality reinforced each other, that a pirate who looked extraordinary was, in some functional sense, more frightening than one who merely was. Roberts wrote his own code of conduct for his crew. This is not a small detail. What Roberts produced was one of the earliest documented democratic governance systems on any vessel in the 18th century. Every man had a vote. Every man had a defined share of any prize taken. Disputes were resolved according to written rules rather than the arbitrary authority of the captain. The ship was a functioning democratic republic in an era when that idea was still considered radical. Roberts was also, and this is the part that genuinely disrupts the Hollywood version, a teetotaler. He did not drink rum. While his crew consumed alcohol in quantities that would hospitalize lesser men, Bartholomew Roberts, the most flamboyant, most theatrical, most visually spectacular pirate who ever commanded a ship, sat on his quarterdeck with a cup of tea. He believed correctly that alcohol made men sloppy and imprecise. His crew's survival rate compared favorably to other pirate vessels precisely because his men were, on average, in a better functional condition during combat than the men they were fighting. Roberts understood something important. Performance, even the performance of reckless abandon, is most effective when executed with clarity. This is what Hollywood synthesized into Jack Sparrow. Ward's functioning intoxication combined with Roberts's theatrical intelligence, a character who appears drunk, who seems to be operating on pure instinct and chaos, but who is always 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. The reality was 2 separate men. one who actually drank, one who only dressed like he should be. To understand what these men accomplished, you need to understand what they were working with. A fully rigged man of war in the early 18th century carried between 60 and 100 cannons across 2 or 3 gun decks. Running it effectively in combat required a minimum of 400 men operating in precise coordination. No radio. No electronic communication of any kind. Just flags, speaking trumpets, rope, and years of brutal repetitive training. A captain commanding such a vessel was essentially conducting a symphony with 400 musicians in real time, under fire, with the additional complication that the concert hall was simultaneously trying to sink. Roberts had been a navigator and first mate before turning to piracy, which meant he understood every system aboard a large vessel at a technical depth most captains never achieved. He could read weather patterns, calculate tides, predict enemy maneuvers from hull and design and rigging configuration, all while holding a cup of tea and looking magnificent. Ward, by contrast, operated on instinct and aggression. He compensated for technical gaps with unpredictability, attacking in ways that made no conventional tactical sense and were therefore nearly impossible to defend against. You cannot prepare your ship to counter an approach that violates every principle of naval engagement. Ward violated principles constantly, and it worked. In the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, Sparrow and Turner steal a full Royal Navy brig from a fortified harbor with a crew of 2. Historians have calculated that a sixth-rate brig of that era required between 40 and 150 men to operate properly at combat speed. The rigging alone, the network of ropes controlling the sails, spanning several miles in total length. 2 men could not realistically have done this, but Jhon Ward, in 1603, came startlingly close. With a crew of fewer than 30 men, he captured and sailed a vessel designed for 200. He did it by waiting until the larger crew went ashore, boarding in the darkness, and getting the ship moving before anyone realized what had happened. He could not fight her at full capability, but he could move her, and sometimes moving is the entire point. The currency of the golden age of piracy was the Spanish silver real, specifically the 8-real coin, the famous piece of 8. It appears in virtually every pirate story ever told, and for good reason. It was the world's first genuinely global currency. Colonial mines in Peru and Mexico produced them in enormous quantities, and they circulated from Manila to London to the coast of West Africa. A single piece of 8 in the early 1700s carried the purchasing power of roughly 40 to 50 modern US dollars in terms of everyday goods. But raw purchasing power understates the meaning of these coins. A skilled London craftsman might earn 12 pieces of 8 in an entire year. A pirate on a successful raid could earn 500 to 1,000 pieces in a single capture. Roberts' most successful single raid, the seizure of a Portuguese treasure fleet off the coast of Brazil in 1720, produced approximately 90,000 pieces of 8 for his crew, plus gold dust, tobacco, and sugar worth considerably more. Divided among 500 men, that was 180 coins per man. 9 times a skilled craftsman's annual salary in one afternoon. When you understand those numbers, the risk calculus starts to make sense. Pirates were not simply criminals. They were men who had been offered almost nothing by the existing social order and had decided, at considerable personal risk, to negotiate different terms. Now for the question at the center of all of this. Was there any truth to the idea that the rum somehow protected Jhon Ward? That constant drinking gave him an edge other men lacked? The answer is genuinely interesting. The primary killer of sailors in the 17th and 18th centuries was not enemy fire, and it was not drowning. It was scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency that progressed from fatigue to bleeding gums to wounds reopening to organ failure, typically within 6 to 8 weeks without fresh fruit or vegetables. A long Atlantic crossing could devastate a crew before they reached any destination. Rum did not prevent scurvy, but ships carrying large quantities of rum often also carried lime juice, used as a mixer, which did. British sailors became known as limeys, not because of rum, but because the lime was the medical intervention. The rum was the mechanism by which the lime found its way aboard. There is also the water problem. Fresh water stored in wooden barrels aboard sailing ships became contaminated within weeks. Dysentery from contaminated water killed sailors in substantial numbers throughout this era. Alcohol, even at relatively low concentrations, kills most waterborne bacteria. A crew drinking diluted rum, what sailors called grog, was consuming a basic antiseptic that kept them alive through bacterial exposure that would otherwise have been lethal. Ward's constant drinking may, in a very real physiological sense, have been part of why he survived voyages that killed more abstemious men. The rum did not make him invincible, but it may have been quietly protecting him in ways that 18th century medicine could not yet explain. The storms were not dramatic backdrops in these men's lives. They were genuine killers. A fully loaded merchant vessel in a North Atlantic winter storm faced waves that could reach 40 to 50 feet. Every joint in a wooden hull flexed under those forces. Pumps ran continuously to remove the water that leaked through those flexing joints. When the pumps fell behind, the ship sank from the bottom upward. A slow, grinding process that the crew could sometimes feel happening beneath their feet. Pirates had a counterintuitive survival advantage over merchant crews in severe weather. Merchant ships were loaded to maximum capacity because cargo was revenue, and a fully loaded ship was sluggish, slow to respond, and dangerously unstable in rough water. Pirate ships were kept lighter, faster, and more maneuverable precisely because speed was their primary tactical asset. A pirate ship could run before a storm where a merchant vessel would have to fight it. Ward survived multiple storms that destroyed better equipped ships. Some of this was genuine seamanship. Some was good decisions about which vessels to keep and which to modify. And some, as historians are honest enough to acknowledge, was simply fortune. The ocean does not negotiate. It does not grant exemptions based on reputation or talent, or how much rum you have consumed. It takes ships and men without pattern or remorse. The fact that Jhon Ward died in his bed, in his palace, in his adopted city, at approximately 70 years old, after 2 decades in the most dangerous profession available to a man of his era, is a statistical anomaly, an outlier of the first order, a thing that should not have happened and did. So what did Hollywood actually take from history, and what did they leave behind? From Jhon Ward, the survival against impossible odds, the functional intoxication that somehow never cost him his edge, the willingness to abandon one identity entirely and construct a new one in a foreign culture, the base of operations in a place beyond the reach of the laws that wanted him dead, and the defiant longevity, the decades of remaining alive and free in a world determined to see him otherwise. From Bartholomew Roberts, The Fashion, the deliberate theater of self-presentation, the understanding that looking extraordinary and being extraordinary are not separate categories. The crew code, the democratic ship, the sense that piracy was not merely crime, but a complete alternative civilization. A different answer to the question of how power, wealth, and human dignity should be arranged. From dozens of other real captains, specific maneuvers, particular escapes, the granular technical knowledge of how ships were actually taken and sailed and fought. Jack Sparrow is not one man. He is the distilled essence of an entire era. 100 years of men who looked at the world that had been built without them, decided its rules did not apply to them, and sailed away. Some died within months. Some, like Ward, built palaces and outlived the governments that had issued warrants for their arrest. The real pirates were not charming adventurers. They were, mostly, desperate men operating in a world that offered them almost nothing. But some of them, a handful, were genuinely extraordinary. People who looked at the life they had been handed and refused it, who reimagined what a life could be and then had the reckless, improbable courage to try. Jhon Ward did not ask anyone's permission to become someone else. He stole a boat in the middle of the night and sailed toward a new identity at 50 years old. 400 years later, we are still talking about him. The ocean keeps its secrets for a long time, but eventually, the tide always brings something back, and that is the real Jack Sparrow, a 50-year-old fisherman who stole a boat, converted religions, built a palace, and outlived every single government that wanted him dead. If that story hit different, if you found yourself Googling John Ward at midnight, that is exactly what this channel exists for. Hit subscribe right now. We drop new maritime history every single day, and every subscriber genuinely moves the needle for us. Smash that like button. It takes half a second and it tells the algorithm that real history deserves to be seen. Drop a comment below. Was the real Jack Sparrow Ward, Roberts, or someone else entirely? I want to see the debate. Until next time, watch the horizon. Something is always out there.